All right, Derbyites, we're just, 36 hours away from Tony nominations coming out. I'm Paul Sheehan, executive editor of Bill Derby. I'm a so-called expert. I have no idea what to predict for the Tony nominations. So I'm turning to two of our inveterate contributors, both in the forums and now at the front of the site, David Buchanan and Sam Eckmann. Of the three of us, I seem to recall David, actually I've been reminded by David that he did slightly better than us last year when it came to predicting the nominations. Actually, just before we start, so David, in the forums, you go by the username of...
Piano Man with two N's.
Okay, and it's two N's because...
Amy Mann, the singer-songwriter. Not Billy Joel. Not a Billy Joel reference.
And Sam Eckmann, you go by the username...
Sam Eckmann, also with two N's, because that's my last name. So you can always hold me accountable.
Well, we decided that we're going to talk about both musicals and plays, but on the musical side, I think we're going to just be saying Hamilton a lot. So I think we should start with plays. And David, you earn the right to start us off. So I guess let's just start with the top category, work our way down. I know we're not making predictions in the featured categories and the creative ones, but we could talk about this too. But with the play, so what are you feeling is sort of out front at this point, and maybe just talk about why, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's nice. We're starting with probably the easiest category of the crop, and as we go on, we'll devolve into maybe some bickering. But this one, I think we could all pretty much agree. The Humans, Eclipsed are both out front, with King Charles III definitely in for a nomination, and The Father probably in that fourth slot.
And what about you, Sam? Do you agree? Is that
I would have to agree. I think if there's anything that's a little shaky, it would be The Father. There's definitely like Eclipsed, The Humans, and King Charles are what everyone really loves. And then there's a fourth slot, which I think The Father will probably get in Frank Langella for Best Actor, but it's not going to show up really anywhere else. But there's not a lot of plays other than that people really latched onto that made an impact.
No, I don't see any other alternatives. I was looking earlier through the eligibility to just say, okay, what could be that fourth slot? And the best I came up with, honestly, was Thérèse Raquin, which was mixed at best, and An Act of God if they want to give us a comedy in that category. And it's coming back in a few weeks, so it feels topical. But I really don't see either of those two having enough support to get in.
Which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Act of God as a comedy. I mean, is it just comedy has a tougher time getting into these categories?
I think in the plays, it's usually dramas that they reward. That's not a rule. I mean that Vanya, Sonia, Masha, and Spike obviously won, and comedies have won before, but I think it's usually a more prestigious drama that wins.
Okay, so then we said The Humans and Eclipsed out front. So David, if you had to predict which is going to win.
I feel like The Humans has been building momentum since it started. It kind of started small off-Broadway, got the transfer to Broadway, and from opening on Broadway to now has really built the momentum. Eclipsed I don't think is doing as well or as remembered or talked about as much. And The Humans also just was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, lost to Hamilton, of course, but I think that kind of gravitas to the piece will definitely carry it through. But I don't know, Sam, what do you think?
I agree. If I had to vote right now, I would go with The Humans. I think it's the type of drama they really like to reward, the kind of family domestic drama. It's almost kind of like a modern update on A Delicate Balance by Edward Albee in a way, because there's kind of an eerie undertone to it, especially the ending is actually really terrifying. But Eclipsed it's about a really important topic. It's maybe would be seen as a more weighty choice in that sense. And it's written by Denai Guerrera, who plays Michonne on The Walking Dead, and she's having a really breakout year this year because she has not only Eclipsed, which has been getting a great response, but also Familiar, which is playing off-Broadway. So that overall year could really help with two productions, could help her push past.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The other night, Sam, we were just talking, and of course, every one of these award shows has a different way of coming up with nominees and winners. And I guess in the Tony Awards case, they have a committee that goes to commits to seeing every play during, early in its run throughout the season, and then they'll get together on Monday. And here's me, the so-called expert, saying, "Oh yeah, there's like 39 people inside." And Sam's like, "No, there were 51." And then it dropped down to 50. Now, why did it drop down to 50, Sam?
Because the playwright of The Humans, Stephen Karam, was in the committee and then had to drop out because his play moved to Broadway, so he's not eligible to serve in the committee.
This is the depth of knowledge that these guys have. And the other thing, so you've got Stephen Karam, The Humans, and that's sort of a very American play, right? And then The Eclipsed is about... where is it? It's set. Is it the Congo?
Captive wives in the Civil War in Liberia.
Liberia, excuse me. Yeah.
It's sort of Lupita Nyong'o plays a woman who is the newest wife number 4, and you watch her sort of look at all of the other 3 wives who are dealing with their situation in very different ways. They adapt in very different ways, and she has to kind of choose her own path of which way she's going to adapt to this horrific wartime scenario.
And I think, David, of Oscar's so white, and it's not going to be Tony's so white. I mean, the diversity, and I seem to recall reading about Eclipsed. Was it maybe the first Broadway play written by a woman, directed by a woman, with an all-female cast? I mean, that's.
I think that no. Well, I think that's happening twice this year. And Sam, you might know better than I, but Waitress has the first all-female creative team, writer, director. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Yeah, for a musical, I'm not sure what Eclipsed, if it has that same boasting right. Sam, I think it's written and directed by females.
It is written and directed. Denai Guerrero wrote it, and Liesl Tommy is directing it. I should know that, but I can't remember if that's a record or not. But I know the Waitress one is a stat that has never been achieved for a musical. But it is rare, even if it's not the record.
Listen, you guys both started in the forums, as did I years ago. Somebody in the forums will tell us that we're wrong.
There'll be a comment below the video.
There'll be a comment below.
Absolutely.
But does that kind of thing, Sam, do you think that sort of stat, that feeling, does that come into play when the Tony voters, who are 800-plus industry insiders, when they're voting, do they vote with their sort of liberal consciences? Do you think?
I mean, I think it does come into play sometimes. Overall, I think the toter, especially the nominators, because they actually do have to see everything, they're pretty savvy theater goers for the most part, and they really go with what they think is best outside of politics. But I mean, that's kind of hard to ignore an achievement like that, because it's written by a woman, directed by a woman, with an all-female cast. There's no males in the cast, and it's an all African-American cast and director and writer. But that doesn't mean they're going to get best play, but it does help.
So then, if we turn to the performance categories, and like I said, we're only predicting the 2 lead ones, and that's just because on the featured side, it's just that the list is so long, and it just becomes too much. But I know both Sam and David the other night volunteered to help us with that next year so that we could do it. And I guess and the reason it's complicated, I guess, is that Tony rule about above and below the title, right? Like, David, explain that, about how people get classified.
Yeah, so when the committee goes to see these shows, and when we see them, there's a billing of actors' names above the title of the play itself and below. So, for example, I believe Lupita Nyong'o from Eclipsed is billed above the title. So when the Tony committee rules on eligibility, if they feel that Lupita Nyong'o is not so much a lead of the piece, but is featured, is more of a featured member because it's an ensemble show, they will say Lupita Nyong'o will be considered in the featured actress category. That's not the case this year. They agreed with the billing that she's above the title and therefore eligible in the lead category. But in many other cases, throughout the year, we'll see people that are a build above the title in featured, or vice versa, where if nobody's billed above the title, sometimes they bump people up to lead. I don't know in this year, I can't think off the top of my head of any really standout examples. Maybe, Sam, you can come up with one.
Well, if we move to revival of a play,
we will, yeah.
The Crucible has 4 people above the title, but the Tony committee decided that the proctors, which are Ben Wishaw and Sophie Okonedo, are lead, and then Kieran Hinz and Saoirse Ronan will be featured. They're moving them down.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good example. Oh, sorry, Paul, we're talking over each other. But that's a good example because Saoirse is the face of the whole of the revival in terms of the marketing and the campaign to capitalize on her Oscar success from a few months before it started. But she's clearly featured. The role has always been small in comparison to, although pivotal, in terms of stage time compared to the proctors, so obviously that was the right choice.
And I realized I jumped over Play Revival. My apologies. I think that makes more sense to talk about before we get into the performances. So, Sam, I'll give you your chance to say first. So, what do you sort of think is out front for Play Revival?
I know David disagrees with me from other conversations, but I have 2 locks, which are A View from the Bridge, which is closed but was so well received there's no way that it's going to miss there, and also Long Day's Journey into Night, directed by Jonathan Kent, which just recently opened. And then other than that, there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but I have The Crucible and Noises Off getting in.
Okay. And David?
I have the same 4 for now. I don't have them in that order. I think A View from the Bridge is definitely a lock, like Sam says. I also think The Crucible is one of the 2 locks. I think I wouldn't have said that before the reviews came out, but the kind of amalgamation of the response it received from the critics and then audience response as well, I feel like it's in as a lock. The other 2 slots, I have 3 shows kind of competing for those 2 slots. Agree Long Day's Journey is in the mix. Agree Noises Off is in the mix. I also just think we have to think about Blackbird as well. It is really a 2-hander-ish show, which is an acting kind of spotlight for its 2 leads, Michelle Williams and Jeff Daniels, in this production. It received decent reviews too. It's considered a revival, so I think it's in the conversation. I don't know if it's enough to be in that 4th slot. I think Noises Off is in for sure, and then Long Days and Blackbird are going to kind of fight it out for that last slot.
And then when we talk about performances, so they're from both the revivals and the new plays. So, David, is there somebody, say, on the actor side, the male actor, that you sort of think it's his to lose, or does it seem like it's a real race?
If you ask me right between the transition of fall to spring in this Tony season, I would say Mark Strong, 100% lock. I still think he's the front runner. He was the lead in the revival of A View from the Bridge. I still think he's definitely the front runner in the category, but there's been a few shows in the spring that have opened that have some really strong male performances as well. Frank Langella received rave reviews for his performance in The Father. He's a 3-time Tony winner. And
in The Father, I think he plays men. Is it struggling with the early Alzheimer's?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's a French play, as I recall, that was a big hit in London. The translation.
Yeah, Florian Zeller wrote the original.
Yeah, terrific, really great performance. He could be competitive, and they obviously really love Langella as an actor. I'm just checking my list here. I guess we can talk about it in length now. I have Timothy Pigott-Smith from King Charles III in there for a nomination. Jeff Daniels for his performance in Blackbird in for a nomination as well. And then I think that last slot is where we're going to see maybe a surprise. I think Ben Whishaw from The Crucible and Gabriel Byrne from Long Day's Journey are both very strong contenders, and I just don't know which of those 2 is going to take that last slot.
And Sam, before you sort of talk about who you're saying, Does it? I know this committee sees everything. You know, there's 50 of them. They go, they don't go en masse, but they go in the first few days of the shows after it's open. But do you think when you look back, are shows like Long Day's Journey and The Crucible that opened recently, in other words, they're at the top of their list of when they're kind of going down? Like we cover all kinds of awards here, including the Oscars, and there's a real strategy to when you send out your screeners, and if you send it out towards the end of the Christmas season, then maybe it's going to be the one that they look at right before they fill out their ballot. Does that come into play in the Tony Awards? Like, do late opening shows have a better chance?
I would say normally yes. Overall, I think it's about what has the biggest impact over the season because the nominators see everything. It's easier to get in as a nominee if you're closed early or premiered early versus actually winning the award because then you deal with people who haven't necessarily seen everything once it gets to the actual voters. I mean, normally it's things that premiere in the spring. I mean, but there's always stuff like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which surprised with Best Play and Best Actor. So I think this year in particular for plays, a lot of the musicals have premiered late, but a lot of the plays have been kind of spread out. There's actually not this whole avalanche of plays near the end. It's just a few of them.
When you were saying Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, do you mean the most recent revival?
Yeah, with Tracy Letts.
Right. Okay, I got a little aside here. So this is the power of Gold Derby. Tracy Letts won, which we all agree was a surprise.
I had him. I think I had him, or I either changed him the day before because the Time interview came out and they said, "Oh yeah, Tom Hanks is out front," and I said, "Well, that's a shame." But I changed my prediction to him, and was so thrilled when Tracy Letts won. But yeah, I think
he wasn't that thrilled in that he came back to the press room and started calling out by name the experts on Gold Derby that had not predicted him to win in the press room. That's what he decided he would spend the first moments after winning, calling out our people that hadn't predicted him. And of course, that's the power of Gold Derby. I've been on that red carpet and heard people congratulating potential winners, "Oh, you're in front in Gold Derby," and they end up sitting in their seats. Yeah. So that's when the real acting happens, when they've lost after they thought they were going to win. So who do you think, Sam, is going to win Best Actor? Are you on the Mark Strong team? Or
I am. It's a weird year for this category in that the two people who gave sort of the most dominant, really well-respected performances are Mark Strong and Tim Pygott-Smith, if I'm saying his name correctly, from King Charles III, who are from closed shows. So I have to wonder, can Mark Strong truly be a front-runner if he's from a closed production? But he is who I have first, and then Tim Pygott-Smith, and then Frank Langella, Jeff Daniels, and Gabriel Byrne. And I have Ben Whishaw getting left out.
Now,
unfortunately.
If say Ben Whishaw gets in, and say The Crucible does really well below the line, or gets a couple of featured actress nominations you weren't expecting, if it suddenly got lots of nominations, would that and say King Charles III underperforms, would that cause you to shift who you think is going to win then? The number of nominations,
especially in terms of if it specifically was The Crucible too, because that is another production by the same director, Ivo Van Hove, who's had a really breakout year with both those of View from the Bridge and The Crucible, as well as Lazarus, the David Bowie musical off Broadway. So if The Crucible overperforms, it's possible they might reward him in his year for The Crucible instead of A View from the Bridge, but I still think everyone kind of embraced A View from the Bridge more than any other play on Broadway this season. So I still have Mark.
I feel like it is really, Sam, similar to the Year of Virginia Woolf, where I think that production closed in March, and it was competing against shows in Revival and Actor that were still open, but Letts' performance and the production itself were so indelible in voters' minds that they voted for them anyway, in spite of the fact that it closed. So I think we'll probably see the same thing with Mark Strong. I haven't heard a conversation about one of the male performers that's so so kind of indelible this season as Mark Strong
Yeah.
in A View from the Bridge.
And then-
so I think he's in.
And then on the actress side, I'm looking at our odds. It kind of looks like a battle of Oscar winners, Lupita Nyong'o versus Jessica Lange. Is that how you see the race sizing up, David? Or
I have both of them in for a nomination for sure. I also have Michelle Williams in. She was left out for her performance in Cabaret from a few seasons ago, but what she's doing in Blackbird, I think people will really want to acknowledge. So I think she's in for a nomination. My other two slots, I have Sophie Okonedo from The Crucible for her lead role in that show, and I also have Nicola Walker from A View from the Bridge. There are some other actresses on the list that have more of kind of a name recognition and maybe cachet, but Nicola Walker's been getting some traction in the precursors where I was unsure if she would, and again, her performance was really impactful. She got terrific reviews, so I think she's in as well.
and Sam, is that your sort of top five?
Yeah, we basically have the same thing. I'm still hesitant to put Jessica Lange towards the top, even though I just saw the show and think she's remarkable and dominates the show, and I think the nomination will be the hardest part for her to get, and if she gets the nomination, then I think she can win. Because Tonys haven't really been kind to her for whatever reason, and she's never received a nomination before.
Right.
So I can't really call her the front runner since they haven't embraced her before, but if she gets nominated, I think she can win. And then I also have Lupita Nyong'o, Michelle Williams, Sophie Okonedo, and Nicola Walker. I think Laurie Metcalf could maybe surprise for Misery. She's pulled it off before. They like her. She's been the only nominee from a show before a closed show. She was the only nominee from, but I have her in the 6th place spot right now.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, she was nominated for November, as I recall, and
and the other place at NTC was the only nominee from the production, I think.
So could you see? You were not going to be surprised then, Sam, if she gets nominated and Jessica Lange doesn't?
That could happen. I mean, they really like throwing her nominations, and they've never thrown one to Jessica before.
But that committee of 50, I mean, it kind of, I think, doesn't it get about a third of them every year get replaced? It's a 3-year term, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think on the committee.
They're 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. So, shifting gears to the musical side. So, other than Hamilton, David, what do you think are going to be
What will lose to Hamilton?
What's that, Sam?
What will lose to Hamilton? What do we think?
Yes, exactly. What will lose to Hamilton? David? What do you have in your other three thoughts?
As of a few weeks ago, I thought the list would look a lot different, but I have, and I'm kind of unsure about all of them, but I have Waitress as a solid number 2. I have Shuffle Along as another solid contender, and then that last slot I'm kind of debating, but I think it's going to be School of Rock, just because it was received so well back in the fall. And some of the shows that opened in the last few weeks did not get received as well as I expected them to based on their earlier buzz.
So what? Because you were saying you had a different list in mind. What underperformed for you?
I had American Psycho in before it opened and started previews. And it could still, don't get me wrong, it could still find its way in that 4th slot because they have a lot of people that absolutely loved that production. There's also a lot of people that absolutely hated that production, and I think it's divisive enough where it might not have enough support to get in over something like School of Rock that, even though people might not have absolutely loved it, I think across the board was received very favorably.
Now, Sam, you love the lead of Big Bright Star. Can you see that getting nominated, or will she be the one to carry the flag for that show?
I mean, Carmen Cusack is unbelievable in that show and absolutely deserves to get in. I don't know if it can break through. I have the same lineup, the 4 lineup that David does, with School of Rock on, I guess, shaky ground because it opened early and doesn't have quite as much buzz as things that just opened. Which I will point out, there's enough contenders in this category for there to be possibly 5 nominees if there's a tie within 3 votes. So it's kind of a similar situation where there's a shaky last spot, which happened the first year they introduced that with Best Play, and there were 5 nominees for Best Play,
Okay.
where there was a unknown last spot. So that could happen again this year.
What about On Your Feet? Is that just too fluffy for them, or?
I think if there were like less impressive original musicals, then that would stand a better chance. It did actually get good reviews, and it's doing very well financially. But I think ever since Jersey Boys won the Tony, it's been really hard for another bio musical to actually win. And if they have other choices that are completely original scores and original concepts, I think those stand a better shot than On Your Feet.
Yeah, I agree.
And then Hamilton and another one of our relatively new contributors, Ted Stevenson's just written a piece that'll be going up on Monday, talking about just the potential for Hamilton, and will it get nominated in every category for which it's eligible? So, starting with the leads, I mean, do you see both Lin-Manuel Miranda and Leslie Odom being nominated, David?
Easily, yeah. I think they're. Okay. Yeah, I think both of them are in, absolutely. The only other lock in the category, I think, is Danny Burstein for Fiddler on the Roof.
He's sort of the new Kelly O'Hara, right? In that he's been nominated a slew of times and has yet to win. So.
Yeah, this will be his 6th nomination, and as of this year, he has unfortunately yet to win. It might be really difficult for him to win for this role, although. And he's Tevye in the revival Fiddler on the Roof. It is the role of his career.
But Kelly O'Hara won on nomination number 6, as I recall.
Yeah, I feel like last year, though, the parallels are quite obvious between her category last year and his position.
That's all I can do is make the obvious.
But no, it's a good comparison. It's very apt. However, she was competing against actresses in shows that didn't have the groundswell that Hamilton does.
Okay.
Danny has to face 2 really formidable performances from Leslie Odom Jr. and Lin-Manuel Miranda that, although Kelly had Chita Rivera for The Visit and Kristen Chenoweth for On the 20th Century, those shows were not like Hamilton was. Runner. Exactly.
But isn't there the potential for the vote to split? Sam?
It could be. I mean, I do think there's differing opinions over who would win from Hamilton. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda obviously has the biggest year of anyone on the planet this year, so they could just check him off. But they're definitely gonna reward him for score and book as well. So they could give it to Leslie Odom Jr., who has probably the biggest showstopper of the night. So he could take it instead.
So we've got Danny Burstein, we got Lin-Manuel Miranda, Leslie Odom, and then what about Alex Brightman for School of Rock? Is that somebody that's
I have him on the bubble. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I do too.
I think I have Danny Burstein, Leslie Odom Jr., Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I have Benjamin Walker getting in for American Psycho because he basically is the show. And then I think Alex Brightman and Zachary Levi from She Loves Me are kind of duking it out over that last spot available.
Okay, and She Loves Me is a revival of a really beloved musical, and I think he's on that piece of Sam's as that's one of your wish list, isn't it? Zachary Levi.
Yeah, Zachary Levi. The whole cast of She Loves Me does an amazing job, but I have Zachary Levi getting in over Alex Brightman just because he's so likable, and I feel like you can't help but vote for that character. He's incredibly charming.
So last year, the Kelly O'Hara story, that kind of made actress in a musical the category. Is it going to be as exciting this year? I mean, David, who do you sort of see as out front for that? Is it Philippa Sue from Hamilton or Dame Audra McDonald? The Tonys love her.
No, I don't think Audra's gonna do it this year. I always refrain from never bet against Audra, but I really feel like Cynthia Erivo from The Color Purple is having like a breakout moment. I think she's the clear front runner in that category. I think you agree, Sam. We've talked about this, right?
Oh, that's right. I know Sam agrees because he told me the other night. He said you don't even have her in your predictions for a nomination, and she's going to win.
Yeah.
So I came home and put her in, at least in the predictions. I don't know. I honestly don't remember if I said she was going to win.
I mean, I don't even think it's a contest, really. I think Cynthia
Okay.
Erivo took the Tony the minute she gave her first performance. And I'm saying that with the fact that Audra McDonald and Laura Benanti are two of my favorite human beings on the planet, and I would just give them awards for waking up in the morning, but Cynthia Erivo is going to take the Tony.
And Laura Benanti, who's in She Loves Me with Zachary Levi, and then Jane Krakowski's down in Featured for a really showy part, right? So what about, is there any, Philippa Sue from Hamilton, does she get nominated or not?
I'm really struggling with this category in terms of who gets those kind of last two slots, because I think Audra McDonald, Philippa Sue, and Carmen Cusack from Bright Star are all battling for those last two slots, and I don't know. It's clear that one really spectacular performance is going to be left off, and I don't know who to think is going to be left in the cold.
And I did it again, like I did on the play side, as I skipped over musical revival. In my defense, there are only 5 contenders this year, and I guess, Sam, that means that there can only be 3 nominees, right? Isn't that the way the rules work?
There can only be 3. Again, there is a possible 4th nominee if there's a tie within 3 votes.
So, assuming
which I think
3,
everyone is hoping for.
assuming,
yeah.
What do you have as the 3?
I have continually taken each one out and put them back in to see how it looks, and I still haven't made up my mind because they're all really fantastic revivals. But I have The Color Purple, She Loves Me, and Spring Awakening. I left out Fiddler, which could be completely wrong, but I...
Wait, isn't that directed by Bartlett Shear?
I know it's by Bartlett Shear, and but
just checking, because I don't know much about Broadway, but I was thinking everything he does.
But they're just like truly all 4 of them deserve to be nominated.
Yeah.
So I'm having trouble leaving one out, and I think in terms of what the amount of nominations they could get, I see Fiddler on the Roof getting the least amount of nominations potentially.
Okay. David,
I don't even think Bartlett Shear is guaranteed directing this year.
Okay. David, what do you think?
I have, not like Sam, I have Color Purple and She Loves Me. Again, I think those are the 2 locks in the category. I have Fiddler in instead of Spring Awakening, but I do struggle with that choice too. I think there's merits on both sides on which show can get that slot.
And Spring Awakening is only a few years old. It's where Leah Michele sort of first came to fame. And it got revived, but Sam, there was kind of an interesting reason for the sort of a fairly recent show getting revived. What was the hook for Spring Awakening?
Yeah, this company Deft West, based out of California, produced it featuring non-hearing and hearing actors. So the performance was simultaneously signed and sung the whole way through.
Like they did with Big River a few years ago.
Yeah, they did that with Big River, and actually the star of Big River, Michael Arden, was the director of this production. And he deserves a directing nomination. But there were multiple characters, like Vendela and Moritz were double cast, so there would be an actor signing as well as their voice singing the part as well. And it was one of the best things I've ever seen on Broadway ever, which is why I have trouble leaving it out of the lineup.
And in fact, your featured actor wish list is somebody from that show, right?
Yeah, Daniel N. Durant, who played the signing actor as Moritz, was just so incredible. I think that category is really tough to break into because Hamilton could easily get 3, maybe 4 nominations in that category, or all the Shuffle Along men are now in that category, including Billy Porter and Brian Stokes Mitchell. So it would be hard for an unknown 20-something actor making his Broadway debut to get in there, but he would be a nice way to recognize the cast.
Right. Well, I guess you've helped me somewhat, but we've got 36 hours for us to... you guys will be busy updating your predictions on Monday and then into Tuesday morning. We got those nominations early, and then I guess hopefully we can reconvene and we'll see whether David does the best of the rest of us against us.
Maybe not this year.
But you know, what do you have any secrets, David? Is there anything that, or you
No,
want
I'm
to give
trying to
We
away?
only did better by one category. Don't
Yeah.
overdevelop.
I am trying to think of lessons learned from last year, because there were a few shows that when we talked after the nominations, we kind of said, "Oh, we really should have seen that." I'm thinking like I think all of us had the audience in Best Play last year, and yeah, I think we all did. And then after it didn't get nominated, we were like, "Oh yeah, because it's it's Helen Mirren's vehicle and a few featured actors, so we really should have known better." I'm trying to think back on those kind of lessons. We'll see if that steers me in totally the wrong direction and I do worse, but we'll see.
Well, we'll come together again on Tuesday and hopefully maybe we'll be celebrating your victory, Sam.
Well, let's hope so.